Before we get into the real substance of this topic, let's start with something that grabs the attention of anyone who thinks they already know the story of World War II. Because when people think of World War II, they picture tanks, battles, logistics, and diplomacy. But the war was also shaped, quietly but decisively, by a hidden layer of economic activity that operated beneath the surface. Entire populations survived not because official systems worked, but because unofficial ones did. From underground barter networks to illicit trade routes that kept cities alive. Shadow economies became the silent engines of endurance. Understanding how they worked doesn't just teach us about wartime survival, it shows us how societies adapt under maximum pressure. If you've ever wondered how ordinary civilians endured shortages, why black markets flourished despite harsh penalties, or how creativity and risk-taking became survival tools, then this is one of those deep-cut World War II lessons you simply cannot ignore. So let's go straight into the heart of it and explore what these shadow economies can teach us today. Lessons that serious historians and modern survivalists will appreciate on a practical level. The first lesson is that scarcity creates alternative systems faster than governments can react. By 1940, many European countries were already struggling to supply basic goods. Rationing was introduced, but it rarely matched actual needs. The moment official channels failed, civilian-run alternatives appeared almost instantly. In Poland, France and Greece, entire communities created local barter circles that operated independently of state oversight. People traded soap for flour, labour for clothing repairs, or firewood for medicine. Scarcity forced innovation. The contemporary lesson here is straightforward. Once an official supply system collapses, people revert to decentralized exchanges. For a modern preparedness mindset, training yourself to recognize valuable skills, such as mending, food preservation or repair work, can give you real barter leverage if formal markets ever fail. The second lesson is that information becomes a currency more valuable than food or money. In occupied Europe, knowing when a patrol would pass, which roads were safe, and which ration offices had loopholes, was invaluable. Smugglers, resistance groups, and even ordinary farmers traded information in exchange for protection or goods. The practical takeaway today is to cultivate situational awareness and build tight, trustworthy networks. In any crisis, whether political, economic or environmental, information shared within a small, reliable group can dramatically increase resilience. The third lesson is that black markets thrive when regulations and enforcement become too rigid. Governments tried to clamp down on price gouging and hoarding, but those same actions often strengthened underground supply chains. Italy and Germany, both heavily rationed late in the war, saw black markets become so dominant that soldiers used cigarettes and boot polish as an unofficial currency. When official rules become unrealistic, people naturally create alternatives. For modern applications, this reinforces the value of flexible thinking. When a system becomes restrictive, adaptability, not compliance, usually becomes the key to survival. The fourth lesson is that mobility determines survival in restricted economies. Shadow traders survived because they moved. Whether it was Greek mule caravans smuggling food past German blockades or French farmers transporting butter secretly at night, mobility kept trade alive. Those who were stuck in cities suffered the worst shortages. This teaches a clear modern principle. Anyone preparing for instability needs at least two supply paths, one local and one mobile. Even today, having a bicycle, a rural contact, or a secondary travel route can be a decisive advantage in disrupted economies. The fifth lesson is that risk tolerance becomes a defining economic skill. Smuggling in World War II was not romantic, it was deadly. Yet thousands took the risk because the payoff, feeding a family, was higher than the danger. Black marketeers weighed risk versus reward with impressive precision. This offers a contemporary application. Crisis economics requires calculated, not reckless, risk-taking. Whether in personal finance, resource planning, or emergency logistics, learning to assess risk under pressure is an ability that translates across eras. The sixth lesson is that corruption increases wherever the stakes of survival rise. Even ration officers, border guards, and local administrators engaged in shadow transactions. Many border guards in Eastern Europe quietly allowed smugglers to pass in exchange for meat, boots, or alcohol. This wasn't ideological, it was human behavior under pressure. The modern lesson is to recognize that extreme circumstances blur institutional reliability. In any future crisis, even well-structured systems can be weakened by personal incentives. Understanding this helps you plan redundancies rather than relying fully on official protections. The seventh lesson is that, resourcefulness becomes more valuable than resources. Civilians found ways to stretch limited supplies, turning grain sweepings into bread, repurposing animal fat into soap, or converting discarded metal into household tools. These habits weren't born from creativity, but necessity. Modern survivalists can take a direct step from this practice resource, stretching before you need it. Learn to repurpose materials, repair damaged tools, and maintain equipment longer than its intended lifespan. The eighth lesson is that community ties are the foundation of any functioning shadow economy. Shadow markets in Denmark and the Netherlands succeeded largely because communities trusted one another enough to cooperate. In contrast, areas with deep social fragmentation relied far more on predatory black markets. The lesson today is that resilience is rarely a solo skill. Building a small network of trustworthy individuals, each with different competencies, creates an ecosystem that mirrors the most successful World War II underground economies. The ninth lesson is that shadow economies remind us that survival is a collective, not individual, achievement. World War II teaches that even in the harshest periods of occupation or scarcity, people found ways to support one another outside official structures. They created a parallel economy that in many cases functioned better than the state-run one. Applying this today means acknowledging that strong personal capability is important, but strong social systems, family, neighbours, and alliances are the real backbone of resilience. If you enjoyed this deep dive into how wartime shadow economies shape survival and how those lessons still apply, make sure to subscribe to Warpaths of Europe and share this video with someone who appreciates serious, no-nonsense historical analysis.